Finally.
We're good today. Thank you. Hopefully nothing.
How about your boy, Jordan? Figured out?
He actually just called me. He was going to try to call me during the meeting. So he can't do that. Because we hadn't even left the next one. We're just checking the next one. Yes.
There's just some things you just, I mean, I want to make it too.
You think? Because I think I need to get through that. I said, yeah.
Quiet all of a sudden.
Ready? Y'all ready? Okay. All right, thank you all for joining us on the last council meeting in October. There is no council meeting next Tuesday. Our next council meeting will be Tuesday, November 5th. That's Election Day. We'll be so excited to meet on election night here for a council meeting. That'll be Tuesday, November 5th at 6 o'clock. With that said, I'll entertain a motion to suspend the rules.
So move.
By Mr. Guines. Is there a second? By Ms. Newman. Any discussion? Call for the question. All in favor of suspending the rules? Oh, say, raise your hand. Okay, that's a 5-0 vote. And if the clerk would note that Mr. Glavin is absent and Mr. Lawrence is absent. Thank you. All right, if the clerk would read the changes, please.
To the policy agenda, we're substituting item 4C, ordinance to amend Chapter 14 pertaining to Parks and Recreation. Substituting item 4E, ordinance to amend Chapter 2 municipal facilities. To the consent agenda, we're adding item 5I, resolution authorizing payment to Pafford Emergency Medical Services, submission of an FY 2025 Emergency Medical Services Operating Fund grant, and entry into a contract for supplemental emergency medical services with the Emergency Medical Services Program of Mississippi State Department of Health. And to the routine agenda, we're adding a docket in the amount of $526,687.34.
Thank you, Carrie. I'll entertain a motion to approve the amended agenda.
So move.
It's a motion by Mr. Guines and a second by Ms. Newman. Any discussion? All in favor? It's a 5-0 vote for the clerk. Okay, we'll now move to the presentation report. Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I want to welcome everyone to our second meeting in October. Before I give the mic to Mike, I did have a couple of, or one comment. We have the second cemetery tours. Mandy, you may be coming up, give us a report, but it was a great Sunday afternoon. It'll be great this afternoon. Colorful characters of our histories will be on display today. But if you have a chance, opportunity, please come visit today, no cost. And Mike, it's your mic.
Two things for the council. At your place, there is a map and some notes about an update on the actions that we've taken so far regarding the homeless camps in the former Broadwater property. I think you'll see the note in the left corner of that. And I'll leave that to you. A second item, an update. As you know, we use govdeal.com to auction off our property. And you'll see the note left at your place that shows we've collected so far $124,000 for various items that we have surplused out. So that's working very smoothly, as opposed to like doing an every other year event. We just do this right continuously as people in the different departments have excess property. So I just wanted to see a little update on how much we've collected so far.
Yeah, that's not chicken feed. It's about almost $125,000.
Yeah.
Keep up the good work. How much is that?
If that's all, I mean,
That's
it's ongoing, because as things pop up, and I think that it's a smooth and graceful way to, get some dollars back for the things that we paid.
All right, well, get them off your inventory and having to worry about them and taking up space and everything. Okay, anything else, Mr. Mayor?
Our report, thank you.
All right, thank you so much. We don't have any departmental reports. We'll move to council reports. Mr. Guines.
Just happy Halloween coming up. That's it. That concludes my report.
Ms. Newman? Mr. McGilvery?
No report.
Mr. What's your name? Shoemaker? We hadn't seen you in a while. Welcome back. I know you've
Just
been
a
out of
couple of
town.
meetings and you forget all about me. No, just a couple of things real quick. I have been out of town. I'm glad to be back. We had trunk or treat Saturday night at Eagle Point Park. I think it went well. The numbers were down a little bit, I think, not necessarily with trick-or-treaters, but with the actual cars that normally register. So hopefully we can do something about that next year and get the numbers back up. But we still had a good turnout. Weather was great, so I think that went well. The roundabout, Mayor, I know I did get some information earlier today that I think the holdup is 2 work orders, I think, or change orders, maybe for the roundabout. So apparently that's the holdup. I don't know. They weren't able to give any kind of,
There was no work on, 4 days at least.
right.
The mayor is meeting with the district engineer tomorrow afternoon.
If you don't mind, Mayor, if you think about it, would you ask him to just, if he can give us any yeah, please, thank you. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker. Really 2 things. One, I'd like to thank Public Works, did a good job on cleaning out the drainage ditch on the south side of Pennzoil Park. It's just an accumulation of leaves, limbs, and everything that was inhibiting the water flow. I think they still have some cuttings, tree limbs and everything they had to cut to get some of the equipment back there to do the work, but that still has to be picked up at Pennzoil Park. But other than that, it looks much better. Thank you. Also, I'd like to offer condolences to George Lawrence's family. His older brother, Francis, passed, and that's why George is not here today. He's attending his brother's funeral, so we'd like to close today in honor of Francis Joseph Lawrence when we adjourn. That being said, we'll move to citizens' comments.
Don't disappoint us, Bob.
We'll allot up to 45 minutes for citizens' comments, allowing each speaker up to 3 minutes. If you would, when you come to the desk here, just be sure and sign in if you've not already done so. State your name clearly so the clerk can get it for the record. And then she'll hit the timer over there, and we're off and running with your 3 minutes. That being said, is there anybody on my right, your left, that would like to address the council? Ms. Hornsby.
I would like to go ahead and give a quick report on the cemetery tour for Sunday. We had our first set of portrayals and tours from 2 to 5. On Sunday afternoon, the weather was beautiful. The turnout was great. I was starting to worry I was going to run out of programs because so many people were coming through. We have 13 portrayals at 12 different spots this year. They range from visual artists, performing artists, architects and craftsmen in their trade, and all the actors have done such a good job. It's just so y'all know, we have actors that volunteer with us, mostly from Biloxi Little Theater, but also we give the opportunity for descendants of some of these people to come portray their relatives. So we have Miss June McGowan, who's portraying her aunt, Dusty Bonger, and Mitchell Gruage, who's portraying his grandfather, Voyle Moran. So
Weather too, both days.
perfect weather. Tonight should be too. You can park at Irish Hill or at the Elks Club, and we're going to be there from 5 to 7.
All right, thank you, Mandy.
Manny.
It's always worth seeing if you've never been, and the price is right, as the mayor noted. Is there anybody else on my right, your left, that would like to address the council? Mr. Christie.
I don't have a pen.
Thank you.
All right. Corey Christie. I just want to speak about the skate park just a bit. I noticed that there is a potential charge for use of that. I just want to say, first off, that's been a great addition to the neighborhood. You know, I drive by that 3 or 4 times a day. The most use is families and young kids. So it's something that definitely we want. We want more stuff like that around. And those guys have been great stewards in the neighborhood. They've kept it cleaner than I think it's probably been in years, certainly since the 10 years I've lived down in that area. And this past weekend, they just spent a whole day out there cleaning up, refreshing the equipment, which they do all own, have raised the money for themselves. So the only city effort has really been to give them the space. They're doing a weekly event out there, which if you guys ever can make it, again, it's a lot of small kids. They're giving lessons and things like that. And so if the charge would apply to them, I would certainly say no to that. They've been great stewards. I think they've earned their worth, and they're providing something no cost to us for the community. You know, just of note, they do own everything there. So,
All right, thank you, Mr. Christie. Anybody else on my right, your left? Anybody on my left, your right? Mr. Baker.
Good afternoon, Council, Mayor Gillich. My name is Ian Baker. I'm the Chief Assistant District Attorney for Harrison, Hancock, and Stone County, and I'm a candidate for judge on the Mississippi Court of Appeals. I just wanted to first thank you for your service. I know that public service can often be a thankless job, so I want to thank you for your willingness to serve, each of you. And the seat that I'm running for is an open seat resulting from the upcoming retirement of my friend, my former boss, and the former district attorney of Harrison County, Judge Joel Smith. Judge Smith called me in December and told me that he would be retiring at the end of this year and encouraged me to seek the position. After discussing it with my wife at length and praying over it for many days, I became convinced that I have the experience necessary to hold this position. I believe that my career experience has uniquely prepared me to serve on the Court of Appeals at the highest of levels. Over the past 11 years in the District Attorney's Office, I've prosecuted thousands of felony criminal cases. I've tried more than 50 felony jury trials to include murders, aggravated assaults, armed robberies, and sex crimes against children. I'm the only candidate running for this position that has tried felony criminal cases. My 2 opponents have never tried a felony criminal case. And that's important because felony criminal cases make up about 55% of the court's docket in any given year. It's by far the largest subject matter area heard by the court. So I think it's important that we elect a judge that has experience trying felony criminal cases. But prior to being in the district attorney's office, I was in civil practice here in Biloxi for 7 years. I had my office over on Pass Road in the old French Connection building, and served as the Civil Service Commission board attorney for the city of Biloxi, and also handled a variety of civil matters. I'm also the only candidate running that has previously worked as a judicial clerk at the Mississippi Court of Appeals. And in that capacity, I assisted in the writing of more than 40 published appellate opinions and observed numerous oral arguments to the court. I'm the only candidate that has experience working at the Court of Appeals or writing published appellate opinions, and I believe that experience matters as well. And what may be most important is I'm the only candidate running that has lived in Biloxi, worked for Biloxi, owned property and owns property in Biloxi. My grandmother lives in Biloxi. My in-laws live in Biloxi. And my mother went to Biloxi High School. So I'm the most Biloxi candidate in the race. So on November 5th, I would ask for your vote for the experience that matters. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Baker.
And I do have some cards I'd like to give you, if that's okay, for those of you who I haven't already given them to.
Sure, if you wished, you can do that right now. I'll speak slowly in case anybody, to give you a little time. Is there anybody else on my left, your right? Yes, sir. Oh, then, Mr. Marinovich, I couldn't see that far anymore, Bernie, I'm sorry. Oh,
Bernard,
Bernard. All right, Bernard.
James Bernard Marinovich. I'm here today to talk about the Biloxi Fire Department, and in particular, the fallen firefighters.
Closer.
In particular, the fallen firefighters. If you recall, 5 years ago, November 22nd, 2019, the city of Biloxi cut the ribbon on Russo Fire Station number 10. Some of you were there, I think. It was my honor and privilege on that day to recognize my uncle, firefighter Anthony Bernard Russo, who on March 13th, 1951, died attempting to board the fire engine as it left the station. Uncle Tony was only 43 years old. Now, each October 20th, which is the date Fireman Orr and Jacko died in 1986 fighting a house fire, the Biloxi Fire Department honors each of the 3 fallen firefighters and their families by placing a wreath on each of their families' grave sites. I'm here today to present a firefighter's plaque to the fire department. I'm sorry.
Take your time.
As a token of my appreciation by the Russo family. As I said in my remarks at the dedication of the Russo Station number 10, it is my hope that the gravesite memorials will ensure that the fallen firefighters' legacy will live on. Thank you for continuing to recognize these brave men who sacrificed their lives protecting the citizens of Biloxi. And with that, I have this. Chief.
Yes, I see it yet. Call him back. Sir?
All right, is there anybody else on your right, my left, that wishes to address the council? Anybody in the back? Okay, that's it, last call. All right, that concludes the public agenda. We'll now move to the policy agenda. If the clerk would read item 4A.
Ordinance to designate 281 Main Street as a City of Biloxi landmark.
So moved.
There's a motion by Mr. Guines. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Glavin. This is first reading. The next reading is most likely going to be at our next meeting, Tuesday, November 5th. That brings us to several second readings. If the clerk would read item 4B.
Ordinance to amend the Code of Ordinances, Chapter 12, pertaining to special events.
The motion was made by Mr. Glavin, and the second was by Mr. Guines. Mr. Glavin.
Mr. Creel or council, would you like to elaborate? Either one.
What the intent of this is a lot of city facilities have been rented and are under different departments, primarily the Parks and Recreation Department. And as the A.J. Holloway fields were redone and we knew we would have a lot of interest in renting those, we looked out and we've never really put this out into the public, or what are the rates for anything we rent, not just the ball fields, but also the Gruich Center, the community center. And we felt it's best to put all of that out in the public, make it transparent, make everybody, if somebody wants to know what something's rented for, it's right there, and they can go to that. In doing that, we went ahead and looked through the entire Parks and Rec ordinance, where a lot of parks were mentioned, some that don't exist anymore, some that have now are new parks. So we've kind of tried to clean that up and make that consistent. Like any of this, if the fees are found to be unreasonable, or if they need to be amended, we can come in and tweak them, but primarily these are all the same fees and prices that are currently in existence.
Okay, 4B deals with fees, particularly any Tier 1 special event requiring excess of extra personnel hours and so forth. I don't know if you were referring to that, Peter.
Oh, I'm sorry, I guess
That's
I jumped to the next ordinance.
It's okay, we were very respectful, we let you finish, but go ahead.
All right, let's talk about this one.
Glad you brought that up.
Yeah. I think the primary thing of this is we had a little bit of inconsistency when you might have an event where the pavilion is being rented and it's outdoors. So, for example, I believe it's is it one of the Matinas or that has that event and was felt he wasn't, none of the special events covered him because he was renting a piece of city property. But we've moved that into a different area. And I think we've just cleaned that up to make the exception now is not required at an indoor venue or any event where the city has a separate agreement. You had certain events like out on the town green, since that was not indoors, there was a question about whether or not it was exempt or not. The reimbursement, the change on the reimbursement for the extra personnel, that's the way it was in the original ordinance. And what that is if there's excess of what's on the application, then there could be additional personnel hours. It's not automatic. We just didn't want somebody estimating this is only a 10-hour event and it turns into a huge event. So I think those are the two main changes there.
Anything else, Mr. Glavin?
No, I don't have anything to add. Thank you, Counselor.
Mr. Guines?
I have none.
Any of the other
Blank it
council members have comments? I just have a question. Who makes the reimbursement decision if it's, let's say the event requires more personnel, city personnel than what was shown in the application? Does the mayor make that decision, or the mayor's designee, or?
I think we would, pretty much there's always a sort of a postmortem done by the police and fire and anybody requiring services. If a lot of extra hours were incurred, that would be brought to our attention, and we probably would have it go through the council to go ahead and assess that.
Be a line item in agreement.
Okay, and it also says may and not shall, which means there's some discretion involved, I would assume. That's why I asked who makes that decision. If it's going to go through the police department following that event, as you said, with a postmortem, and that point is determined, I guess, that there was additional cost that the promoter would be required to pay, then it would come to the council in the form of resolution, I'm assuming.
I think you're right. I think the original application will also have this exact language on there, like you're representing these are the hours, and if you're really off, you better be prepared to.
Well, I think these things be denoted in the event agreement, when they actually enter in the thing, what the parameters would be from and to and that sort of thing.
Right, so language would be in the contract, in the agreement, everybody's signing off on it, so it's understood at that point, correct? Okay. All right. I don't have any other questions. We'll call for the question on this matter. All in favor of the ordinance as presented, raise your hand. That's approved on a 6-0 vote. If the clerk would read item C.
Ordinance to amend Chapter 14 Parks and Recreation.
All right, the first reading of the motion was made by Mr. Guines with a second by Mr. Glavin. Mr. Guines, any questions or comments?
Yeah. Peter, could you just give us a little quick overview?
Should make sure I get the right one. Let's see. That's C. Okay.
Correct.
C.
Right, this is where we are, the times for the parks were not all consistent. We wanted just to make those all consistent except for certain exceptions, like the stadium. But the standard time now for all parks is opening at 7 o'clock, closing at 8 o'clock. Exceptions are such if there's a dog parks close at 10, city athletic fields can go until 11 o'clock if the city is approving it. And all these times were sort of from talking to tournament promoters and things like that, what they would be expecting. Splash pads, I think, are open until 8. And then I guess we added 2. If some park just is added, or we forgot about a park, it's 7 opening and closing at 8. If you look at this page where almost everything is crossed out, that's where all the other parks were sort of lumped together with, and they were grouped for some reason, different groupings, and we just listed them 1 through 26, just so you could find them easier. We put them in alphabetical order so you could locate them faster, just things like that.
Great, thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Guines?
That's it.
Mr. Glavin?
Just for clarification, Counselor, these aren't going to be like open to the public at all these hours that they can just go take over the fields and start playing on them,
Right.
correct?
This
If
just-
if a
this-
field needs to be reserved for a certain purpose, we're developing that policy and procedure and fees for that activity to be done, right?
That's right.
All right, I just don't want it to be confused if people are listening or reading this and saying, okay, they're now open for anybody to go to 8 or 10 or 11 o'clock. I think we're taking the right steps forward in doing this, and I'm sure that it'll kind of evolve a little bit more as we get into it and see exactly the purpose and use and needs of the parks, but I think this is a step in the right direction. Thank you.
Anything, Mr. Shoemaker?
I agree with the times and those things, but I did have a question about the Parks and Recreation Commission. And I'm really not that familiar with it, but is that something that we're still utilizing recently or now? Or is that something we just hadn't used in a long time?
I think it's something that's been on the books, and I've never been aware of it being existing since I've been here in the late 80s. Sherry may know.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And I think there's always plenty of advisory people when it comes to parks. So, I mean, a 7-person committee, if it's necessary or not, it would just be another level of meetings and kind of bureaucracy, I felt. So at some point, we've got to clean some of these things out.
That's all I have, thank you.
Okay. A couple of things. I noticed on the splash pads, an opening time of 9 a.m. and a closing time of 7 p.m. Usually they're open in the summer. It's usually still light until about 8:15.
We amended that to make it closing at 8.
8 o'clock, okay, thank you.
That was one of our substitutions.
Gotcha, okay. I'm sorry I didn't look
No.
over that carefully.
That's okay.
The other thing is on items, on sections 14.1.1 and 14.1.2 and 14.1.3, this is the Parks and Recreation Commission. Personally, is it still constituted? Is it still in effect? Or, personally, I'd like to see that included or continued or reconstituted, just to get public input. Be a great way to get feedback on what we need in the park, another perspective, what we need in the parks, what kind of issues there are, the conditions of the park, a lot of eyes. As I understand it, they're advisory. I don't know if anybody here on my side of the bench agrees with me, but I would,
I do. I agree with you.
I would offer, well, it's not really an amendment. We would, since it's already on the books, we would just exclude, well, I guess we would amend what's presented here. I'd make a motion that we, if my wording is correct, exclude sections 1411, 1412, and 1413. These are all related to the Parks and Recreation Commission, so that they remain and are not part of these amendments. So that would be my motion. If there's a second, I'll entertain it. Okay. Mr. McGilver, you may have a comment, and then I'll open it up to other council members.
I have one comment. The three locations that are on item number 5 that are exempt from the 7 o'clock go to 5 o'clock, could we add the Margaret Sherry area into that? More importantly, the walking track and the pickleball park. There's folks all the time out there at 4:30 at the walking track, and I know that the pickleball folks, when they have tournaments that start at 7, they're out there at 4:30 and 5 practicing. So if we could add that in there. And I think the Park and Recreation Commission is a great idea. I had 3 calls over the weekend from residents in Ward 4 that were interested in participating in that. And ever since I've been on the council, I've had many people call me and asked about getting a group together to do just that for Park and Recreation. So I think it's a good idea. So I second that motion.
All right. Are there any other comments at this time? Mr. Shoemaker?
Just real quick, I would echo what Councilman Tisdale and McGilvery said. I think it could be an asset. I know we do have a lot of people frequently that bring up parks, but I think this could be an asset for the city if we could, and again, I wasn't aware we had this, but if this is something we could, get going again, and I think it could be an asset for us, and I've had some phone calls as well regarding the same thing. So I think it's a plus for the city.
All right, thank you, Mr. Shoemaker. Mr. Glavin?
Yeah, I have a question for the director, or some questions for the director. So you were quick to come up and let us know that I guess it stopped functioning in the 80s.
Right.
And when it was functioning, do you have some insight on what did the makeup of that commission look like? Who did it?
If I can remember, I went one time just to do a report on sports, and it was like Stephen Castleman, and they were just giving advice, like on participation. Kids should participate 50% of the time. And then if it had something to do with purchasing and all, that's something they would have to bring before council.
So was this commission outside? Was it internally or was it externally? Was it made up of business people or people in the community outside the city?
Yep, it was made up of, the city, now Biloxi residents from each.
No, I understand that, but was it internally city employees or was it?
No, city employees.
Okay.
So brought to you by the council, and it was, mothers, fathers,
all right,
businessmen.
And the reason, do you know, or your opinion, the reason it stopped functioning?
I have no idea.
Or was disbanded? Was there not a lot of interest and it just kind of disappeared, or?
I think so. When I'm trying to think when I think when Mayor Holloway come aboard, it would just kind of was abolished.
Okay. That's all I got.
Any other questions, Mr.
Now,
Guines?
you mentioned something about 1411, 1412, I think. What exactly are you accomplishing with this?
Yeah, right now, those sections of the code refer to the Parks and Recreation Commission, that what the powers and duties are generally, and the rules of procedure for that commission, and that it serves as an advisory function.
Okay.
So they're not making any fast and hard decisions from,
Just advisory.
just advisory. And I'm thinking, geez, if that, kind of fell apart or disappeared, that was about 40 years ago, so it'd be hard to remember by anybody, I think. Any other questions? Ms. Newman, anything? Anybody else? Ms. Bell, I have to remember my question now, it was on the tip of my tongue. So who met with the commission? I suspect it wasn't, or how frequently did they meet, as best you can recall? But I would think they met with the director and just offered input. It was just advisory, and that was about it. The CAO wanted to sit in, he could, or whatever for that matter, but it was pretty much established, advisory, and somewhat informal. That'd be accurate.
Yes, it was once a month, and the director ran
Okay.
it, and she or he would bring in, your coordinators, let them do a report if needed.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Somebody, Peter, you may want to comment, or maybe the mayor or Mike, you may have comments.
I guess before I get to the committee, I'm looking for the walking tracks, and I see there, I think that's probably an oversight, and that would be in 3, exception B, 3. If we're doing them alphabetical, it would go between Lighthouse Park and Pennzoil Park, and we'd put Margaret Sherry walking track in there. Oh, okay. Well, we'll put parentheses Margaret Sherry after Pops Ferry Recreational Complex, because that could be either side, I guess.
That'll conclude the pickleball court, too.
Well, 3 talks about city walking tracks, including but not limited to. So for the, I think the pickleball courts would go up into 2. That's an athletic field. Some of those pickleballs, people are pretty much athletes. So we'll put them on the athletic field.
For 5 o'clock?
5 in the morning?
Yes, sir.
Is the sun up? I mean, you might want to say sunrise. I mean, I wouldn't really think a city employee should have to be out there to get the lights on or monitor that, I don't know what entails them coming out, and if they have keys or if they turn the lights on themselves, or, so the time of that, we're just trying to keep, that, I think the problem was each park wanted its own little opening and closing time based on their sometimes neighborhood preference. And it's hard to sort of legislate something like that when, I mean, if they want to go out and come in they're probably already doing it, I guess. And nobody's going to cite somebody for showing up half an hour early, but, I mean, what's to stop all-night pickleball if they really want to do it, or if a committee said do it? So, and believe me, that's not a stretch. They would have midnight pickleball if they could.
Just remember, you first raised the issue today at this time.
So I guess the times, I think the times could be tweaked if needed, but I guess I'm not really gonna speak in favor of changing all the times up right now. It's up to y'all, of course. The Parks and Rec Committee, I guess, surely, I mean, it could be done. It could be done and see what it is. I mean, the fact that it has not been done is it apparently hasn't been an issue legally for 40 years, but it's like a lot of these things in the code, you start to tweak something and you find something like this. When I saw it, I had no idea what it was. And so we did a little bit of research on it, and it's, I mean, but when you have in there that they have bylaws and they have their own regulations, they have all the powers and duties of a park commission under certain statutes, but yet they're still advisory. It didn't occur to me that we would still want this, but of course, if you want it, you can have it, so.
Should we, it's kind of like we're voting for something, but we don't know what's entirely in it. Should we say, okay, listen, we want an advisory board for the Parks Commission, but should we let you study it and come back and put it in its form that works for today and may not work for what was put in place 40 years ago? Would that be more prudent?
I think it
If
could
we took
be,
steps that way, and then you could come bring it to us, and then if we see any more tweaks that we need to do, then we can kind of dissect it from there.
or it could be stripped for now with understanding that we're going to study it and come back to it with recommendations, and we can always add some or all of this back in.
How much time do you think you would need, Counselor, to study it and bring something back? What's a reasonable amount of time?
Probably the next 2 meetings from now would be fine. I mean, this actually is probably modeled off the same language as the Planning Commission, the way with all this resignation and death, vacancies filling, and there was a predecessor Park and Retention Committee in '82, and they got to be in interim terms. So it must have been a very passionate thing back in the early '80s to be on this park committee, and
I would say typically you get an interested group of parents that follow kids through from T-ball all the way through high school ball and American Legion ball, and that's when you usually see a greater interest in, and usually they do a lot of work to improve the facilities themselves. So that's my guess as to how all this came about.
right, it may have been an early version of like Public Works for the parks, that this committee might have gone out and helped maintain a lot of the parks. I don't know.
And back then, the dynamics of youth sports was a lot different. You didn't have a lot of the travel ball.
Kinds of things, it really changed the complexion of
Yeah.
this, what the formality of where, what, where, and when. Now it's everywhere, all the time.
Yep.
All right, so Mr. Glavine, you suggesting maybe we table this and allow Mr. Abide some time to clean up some of this?
Committee, not a commission.
That sounds reasonable, or like Mr. Abide said, we can go forward, stricken this piece, and let him create a new Parks Commission, or whatever, Parks and Rec Commission,
November.
and then add that back to the ordinance. Whatever the pleasure, whatever is
Okay.
less cumbersome.
So we have a motion and a second on the floor right now, basically to retain sections 14:1-1, 1-2, and 1-3. If we strip that from what's proposed here, it would still be in effect, and Mr. Abide could bring something to us at the November 5th meeting dealing with those three ordinances, 14:1, 2, and 3, on that Parks and Recreation Commission. Does that make sense?
I think either way you do it, I get the message.
Okay.
So it doesn't really matter to me.
All right, so we've got a motion on the floor and a second, motion by myself, a second by Mr. McGilvery to strip sections 14:1-1, 14:1-2, and 14:1-3 from this proposed ordinance. I think everybody's commented that wanted to. All in favor of removing 14:1-1, 14:1-2, and 14:1-3 from this ordinance, just signify by raising your hand. All right, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 votes, 1 opposition.
Yeah, I'm the opposition.
Okay. Mr. Guines in opposition.
So that was an amendment to
Correct. That's correct.
just undelete those three, just for Kerry. You got it?
That's correct.
Good.
All right, now, is there any further discussion on this proposed ordinance? There being none, we'll call for the question. All in favor of the ordinance as the amended ordinance presented, just raise your hand. That's approved on a 6-0 vote. All right, thank you, Mr. Abad. If you would, just make a note, we'll look for something on the November 5th agenda. Thank you. Thank you, sir. All right, that brings us to item D. If the clerk would read item D, please.
Ordinance to amend section 13148, consuming alcoholic beverages or possessing open container containing any alcoholic beverage in certain places.
Thank you. The motion was made by Mr. Glavin and the second by Mr. Guines. Mr. Glavin.
Yeah, I got a few questions. I've read through it. I think I understand it. I just want to make sure that, we passed an open container or these entertainment zones, I guess is the better word, that allow folks to, in certain areas, buy a beverage, and they are allowed to walk outside of these zones and consume alcohol. They are allowed to walk on public streets or through public parking lots and all that kind of stuff. Just want to ensure that this doesn't create any kind of blowback on that, and all of a sudden we'll have people that are sitting by their cars just having a conversation after they walked out of an establishment, and then all of a sudden they're going to be cited while they're in the parking lot making a decision to eventually get in their car and drive off or other activity. That's one of my questions. I think I've read the disclaimers if there's a Mardi Gras event or some kind of sanctioned event. It seems like that's one of the exceptions in here, but I just want to make sure we're not creating any kind of wrinkle at all. I just need that some commentary on that.
No, it does not affect any of the open container zones. Those all stay in effect. I think what we had was technically on the books, you couldn't sell alcohol at Point Cadet Pavilion, or you couldn't have an event at Point Cadet Pavilion where alcohol was being sold.
Yeah, that's it.
Or the town green, and we know that has been going on, and we sponsor those events. So we're trying, that's the primary tenet of this. We're trying to clean that up to say, if we have an event there and it's under a rental agreement, then it's okay.
All right, so this actually makes it even a little bit more flexible on some of the events that we sponsor or support.
It keeps those event people out of technical violation.
Okay, I'm with you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Glavin. Mr. Guines, anything?
Yeah, and just a foot stomp what you were talking about. It basically just brings us into compliance of what we're already doing. So we've been doing it already, and I think I've talked with Ms. Quave about it, and it just kind of puts us in line with what we're already doing, so we won't be illegal.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Any other comments by the council? There being none, we'll call for the question on item D. All in favor of the ordinance amendment as presented? It's approved on a 6-0 vote. For the clerk, thank you. That brings us to item E. If the clerk would read item E, please.
Ordinance to amend Chapter 2 Municipal Facilities.
All right, the motion was made by Mr. Guines and the second by Mr. McGilvery.
All right, Mr. Peter, you're up again.
Okay, this is the one I think I talked about, half an hour ago?
And we listened intently the whole time.
So I would have the clerk read back my comments.
I'm good.
No, I think we've prematurely discussed this, but I mean, it all still is in effect.
Great. That concludes my comments.
Mr. McGilvery, anything?
I'm good.
Any questions, discussions? I have a couple of questions. Give me a moment to find them. Is there a form that an organization fills out requesting, the use of the facility? I assume there is, and everything in the equipment, correct?
Yeah, and those have been online for quite a while. You can go to the website and find the facility rental agreements and see the prices there, but how those prices were set and determined is not really clear. So that's part of what we're trying to do.
Also, I'm trying to find it in here. All right, there's a line in there that we're adding under section 214.4 that says all requests for a reduction in facility and equipment rental fees must be in writing and include sufficient documentation to allow the city council to make a determination that the organization and/or event is qualified. So if someone or an organization asked for a reduction in the fees, that's something that comes to the council for approval. And I would suggest that we probably need some guidelines to help us be consistent in all of this. I know there are some requirements that it's got to be tax exempt and so forth. There ought to be some document they can provide to do that. Or that it supports a social or community service program. That's why I asked if there was a form. Somebody's got to fill out something, and hopefully that gives the councils some basis. If we had some criteria or guidelines that would help us in terms of being consistent on whether we permit reductions in the fee. That's all. I just want us to be fair to everybody. So it may be, I'm willing to go along with this right now, but if you could put together just some criteria that would help us determine maybe some things on that form that if completed or left incomplete would help us make a decision regarding a request for reduction.
Yeah, that will do that. I mean, in this language is closer to what the statute says. I think before it would go through actually the CAO, and if they didn't like the answer, they could appeal it to the council, but the statute is more in line with what we're doing here. And I've seen the county actually, every one of these, they do it that way, so it's be pretty simple for us to get the county's procedure and provide y'all with that.
Like I said, I just want us to look at this and be as consistent as we can possibly be.
Mr. President, I think, in the spirit of what you talked about is what we've been doing with regard to community service or 501c3, some of these generating of income events, so that may not always be just because you're 501c3 in a particular event. I mean, that's those kinds of rules need to be
right, and that's a lot of these, if not all of them, will come to us, and they'll all be very similar, but there are going to be some significant differences, and that's why it would help if we can take every precaution to be consistent. The only other question I have, it mentions in there an associated administrative fee. That's in section 214-5. The fee for the use of all fire guards and police officers mandated by the fire department, blah, blah, blah. Particular use shall be $35 an hour for a minimum of 3 hours, plus any associated administrative fees. And I just don't know the lingo. I'm sure there are reasons why that's there. I don't know what other fees might apply.
We use a program called Extra Duty Solutions, and for the officer, it's $35 an hour. The administrative fees is for that program when they sign up through it, and it's $40 and some change an hour is what it comes out to.
Okay, so that would be an example of an administrative fee, right? Is that the only one you're aware of?
That's the only one I'm aware of.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's
Chief, may I follow up?
Sure,
on that?
Mr. Quinn.
So can you give me an event that applies to?
It's the off-duty employment, like if we're working a wedding or something like that, or where it wouldn't be city overtime, it's off-duty employment stuff.
Right.
Or if Mississippi Power is doing a traffic control, we usually use off-duty for that.
Okay, so this would apply to, say there was a pickleball event that required this.
Extra security.
This would apply to that, and we would charge that entity when they make the application for this special event.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions on this item?
I got another comment, Mr. President, if you don't mind. So I know we talked about 501c, but if it was an economic benefit, I mean, I understand we could have an event say it's the flag football event for Friday and Saturday versus maybe there's a Powerade national flag football event that's for a week and bringing in 50 teams or 100 teams, that in that case, we could make a decision because of the economic impact to waive certain fees. Would that be one of the examples or not?
Well, it's, and I'll get you the exact statute language, because we're really just trying to track the statute.
Right.
It's probably a blend of, is it a commercial event? That's a big part of it. I mean, if it's a lot of schools just having a tournament, that's one thing. If they are competing for prize money and a promoter is making some overhead, that may be different. If it's for, and this is a standalone exception, purpose of supporting social and community service programs. So a lot of these, when you try to, it's hard to just to one size fits all, but if the council makes certain determinations, it's within their power to do, they have a pretty good latitude on things like that.
Okay. All right.
Any other questions or comments from the council? Anything else from the attorney?
No, sir.
Okay, there not being any, we'll call for the question. All in favor of the ordinance as presented, signify by raising your hand. That's a 6-0 vote for the clerk. And that brings us to item F.
Ordinance to amend section 16.5 stormwater ordinance.
And I cannot recall who made the motion. Do you? Glavin and Gines, that's right. It was a Glavin and Gines show that week. All right, the motion was made by Mr. Glavin.
And I'll make some comments and allow the director to follow up. I made a recommendation to table because this takes away certain authority from the mayor to make certain decisions, and I just felt it deserved a little bit more scrutiny to make sure we didn't need to give up that authority. My understanding, and you can elaborate, director, is that we can get certain points for doing certain things to lower flood insurance for our residents, and in this case, that's what's happening. And if we don't tell FEMA or the powers to be that we're not complying with this, we could lose points, and therefore we could lose the opportunity of having lower flood insurance. Am I correct in that?
Correct, yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay. We participate in the community, in the National Flood Insurance Program. There's a federal flood ordinance that we have to adopt. There's a state stormwater ordinance we have to adopt, but a lot of these activities are intermingled together. And what's happening right now, and the reason that this is so urgent, is because CRS is in the process of evaluating us to see if we maintain the rating that we have that would maintain the discounts for the residents out there. And this being a state ordinance, it is a part of that evaluation. So if this change is not approved, what would happen is, in this evaluation, they would take those points away from us, and it would mean that everyone's flood insurance would go up by 5%. So that's the reason this is critical. The recommendation for removing that ability for the mayor actually came from DEQ. They came in and reviewed our ordinance and said, you can't have this in there. You're going to have this removed. We explained it to the mayor. They agreed. They said, we don't have any objection to it. Let's go ahead and move forward with it. But to maintain the 6 rating, number 6 rating that we have right now that gives everybody a 20% discount on their flood insurance is kind of hinging on the stormwater ordinance being changed here.
I got a question. So say after all the mud or the smoke clears, whatever you want to call it, and we determined that the points that we would lose wouldn't jeopardize that discount, can we come back a year from now or whatever and take that out and give the mayor the authority, that authority again? Or once we do this, that's the way it's going to be forever?
Well, I think we would be, if we did that, we would be, in a sense, kind of thumbing our nose at them. I mean, they've told us what we have to do.
No, I'm just saying if we determine later that those points aren't as critical, and we're not going to lose the 5% a year from now, 2 years from now,
Could you do that?
could we put that back in effect and say, no, we want to give our mayor that authority?
Could you do that? Yes. Would you want to do that? We are constantly looking for more activities in that manual. That manual's about this thick and it's full of
I've seen
to
it.
try to get more and more points, because the more points we get, the greater the discounts we can give to our people. And by, crossing off something that generates this number of points,
It would
actually
it
hurt
would
us.
attract some attention probably as well. Okay. Thank you, Director.
Okay, anything else, Mr. Glavin? Mr. Gaines, any comments or?
Yes, not really, other than just saying that, flood insurance is a major obstacle, especially on the east side of Biloxi. And anytime we can get more points and get an opportunity to get a savings for all these individuals, we have to take that. So we have to go along with it. And I recommend that we all push forward in that area, because, in my area, it's a big relief just to get 5-10%. We'll take 1% right now. So I encourage everybody to support it.
All right, any other questions, comments, or concerns from the council? There being none, all in favor of the ordinance as presented? It's approved on a 6-0 vote. For the clerk, thank you. That brings us to resolutions. And if the clerk would read item G, please.
Resolution granting vacation of a portion of an improved public right-of-way identified as Youngum Drive.
I'll move it.
A motion by Mr. Gaines,
I'll second it.
a second by Mr. Glavin. Okay, Mr. Gaines?
All right, Mr. Creel's already in place.
Okay. This section of Youngum runs right through what's used as the playground for the Catholic school there.
Oh, yes.
And so it's right in there behind the police station. And actually, the school is on the south side of this section of Youngum, and the playground is on the north side of this section. So what we're doing, we're not closing all of Youngum. We're only closing it from the rear property line of the house that faces Benaki to the rear property line of the house that faces Lestrade. So all the people that come in off of Porter to get to Lestrade will be able to still get there. And the one house affected over on the east side on Benaki will still have access into their yard, but it's designed to protect the kids, and that's what it's for.
Anything else, Mr. Gaines?
Satisfied.
Mr. Glavin, anything?
I have nothing to add.
Any questions or comments from the council? Just have one, just to be clear. So Youngins runs from Benaki west to Porter.
That's correct, yes.
The entire street. The only portion we're vacating is what's on the Nativity Elementary School property. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Okay, so we would still maintain what's that portion of Youngins east of the school and west of the schools. Those two sections are not being vacated.
No, they're not.
That's all I wanted to know. Thank you, Mr. Creel. All right, there being no further questions or comments, all in favor of the resolution as presented? It's approved on a 6-0 vote. Thank you. That brings us to the consent agenda.
So move.
There's a motion by Mr. Gaines. Second by Mr. McGilvery. Okay. All right. Mr. Gaines,
I have
questions
nothing.
about anything?
I'm good with it.
Ms. Newman, any questions? Mr. McGilvery? Mr. Glavin, anything?
I have none.
Mr. Shoemaker, anything? The only question I have is item E, and if,
I just wanted to mention,
Go ahead.
we would ask the council to table item D. We had sent out the program for public information to the groups that participate in that group. It's all about responding to emergencies and floods and those kind of things. And right before I walked in here, I got an email that said that there were some incorrect names on the list in there. So we'd like to have time to go back and correct those names and then bring it back. So
so that's item D.
D, yes, sir.
Okay. I'll move to take it off.
There's a motion by Mr. Guines and a second by Ms. Newman to table. Was there any discussion? All in favor? It's approved on a 6-0 vote. All right, going back to where I was on item E, Ms. Labata. I'm just curious. On item E, it's a one-source purchase, installation of a PDK door access system for use in Public Works, and that's being paid for out of the Public Works budget?
Yes.
Okay, and what, is that just a security, say, for a warehouse, or?
That's actually our access point to all of the 4 buildings. Our door access control system is out of date, and it can't be updated anymore, so some of the doors aren't working. They work sporadically, so this is to replace that key access through all 4 Public Works buildings.
Okay, and is that your badge? Is that what you use for that key, or? Do they?
Well, no, but it looks like a badge.
A fob or?
It's like a little
okay.
fob thing, yeah.
Okay, thank you, that's all I have. Let's see, nobody else had any items on the consent agenda. All in favor of the consent agenda, less item D, which was tabled, just raise your hand. Consent agenda is approved on a 6-0 vote. Are there any exceptions?
None.
None. Nobody has any exceptions. All right, that's terrific. That brings us to code enforcement hearings. Okey-doke. All right, Mr. Creel, if you would, we'll go through these. Hopefully, they'll all be resolved.
Okay. Item A, Donald and Jalance Holden, 6133 Stacy Lane. That case has been resolved.
Outstanding.
Item B, Kathy Lankson, 337 East Drive. That case has been resolved. Item C, Multani Sukranjan, 1704 Beach Boulevard. That one is still in violation.
That's on the corner of Rodenberg and 90.
Right across from Sharkhead, yes, sir.
Shark, okay. All right, is Mr. Sukranjan or anyone else present to speak on this matter of 1704 Beach Boulevard? No one. This hearing is closed. Item D, Mr.
Item
Green.
D, J.N. Kivett, LLC, 100 Kivett Street. That case has been resolved.
All right, good batting average today. Thank you, Mr. Creel. That brings us to the routine agenda. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move it.
Second?
Motion by Mr. Guines, a second by Mr. Glavin. Mr. Guines, would you like to do the honors today since Mr. Lawrence is not
Mr.
here?
Walt, do you mind? I'll pretend to be George today. Except I won't fuss with the mayor.
Take off my shoe.
Good afternoon, council.
Good afternoon.
All right, so last Thursday, on October 17th, the city received $1.12 million from MEMA. Currently, we don't have anything in the system yet. We'll probably find out by next Thursday. Right now, we're waiting on the draw schedules from our contractor, Case, to predict out how much monies they may need for the next 3 months. We submit that to MEMA, and then they advance us 30 to 60 days in advance based on those draw schedules. So the contractor's aware we need those draw schedules, and once we have those, we submit them, and then we get the advance funding to help keep the train moving.
Okay, great. Thanks, Walt. Do you have another date? You don't have a date yet with the FEMA MEMA, do you?
For our next conference call,
Yes.
we have it every 2 Thursdays, so it should be, it wasn't last Thursday, so it'll be this Thursday, actually.
Okay.
Every 2 weeks.
All right, thanks.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions or concerns about the routine agenda? There being none, call for the question. All in favor of the routine agenda as presented? That's approved on a 6-0 vote. I would make a motion that we close in memory of Francis Joseph Lawrence. That's George Lawrence's brother, who passed recently and is being buried today. I would assume that all the council will second that. All in favor of adjourning? We're adjourned. See everybody on Tuesday, November 5th, unless I see you at the cemetery tour with the mayor and the attorney and the CAO, Jerry Creel and Chris Debeck.
Oh, that I just handed you out? Yeah, you can have that.
All right.
We got a bridge commission too, to create roads on Deer Island.
I can do sand beach, everything else too.
Yes, sir.
No, the one at the communication station. The issue is not whether or not it's needed, the issue is which year we're gonna pay for it out of. Yeah, but we will find the money to do it this year. It's just last year, the whole thing with Diana is all about last year. You know, she's saying that